I'm Len May, and I'm the CEO, co-founder of EndoCanna Health. We're an endocannabinoid genomics company, and I have the distinct pleasure of having Dr. Chris Spooner join me, who's a naturopathic specialist, and we're going to discuss this topic and many others. Tune in. Thanks. Kind of shifting back to cannabis, what chemical properties does cannabis and hemp possess that could positively impact your immune system?
So when we take a look at particularly like CBD, for example, what you're seeing in CBD is a balancing or regulation, particularly of some of the inflammatory pathways. Okay, so inflammation control. And that ties in, things like arthritis, autoimmunity, things like some of the inflammation in the brain that we're associating with things with like mood disorders and dementias and this type of stuff as well too. So those cannabinoids, as they start to modify that inflammatory response, and through those various different types of communication methods like tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin, interferons, this type of thing. So it's that balancing effect, calming effect, stabilizing effect. And that's where the cannabinoids fit in, and that's just been in my experience. There's other elements of that again are not necessarily related to the immune system, like things like stress management and how things like your stress hormones impact your immune system. And again, that's a whole other different set of things which you'll probably ask me about, called epigenetics.
So you're talking about CBD and modulating your immune activity. What about THC? Because the way that you just explained it, you're looking at the whole endocannabinoid system. So if you're modulating your immune system with CBD, and how do you look at terpenes and terpenoids and flavonoids and the whole plant, and also some other cannabinoids, to be able to, since we're not just isolating CBD and we're not just talking about one single function, it's part of your entire endocannabinoid system. And you were talking about stress management. Well, how do you see all that kind of fitting together to be able to support your overall immunal health?
Yeah, so let's take it back to this thing which we'll call stress biology, right? So when you get stressed, you get a whole bunch of things start to kick in. All the alarms start to go off. You start releasing all these hormones that start to get you into the fight or flight mode. And one of those things is that, as the cortisol levels go up and these stress hormones go up, you start to suppress your immune system. Anybody who's ever taken something like prednisone, for example, prednisone is a corticosteroid, and it suppresses immune function. It acts as an anti-inflammatory. So what we do know is that, your immune system starts to change. It starts to get quieted down by those stress hormones. And if you have acute stress where it goes up and down, that's one thing. If you have a chronic stress, that's another one. And there's all sorts of different types of adaptations that start to come into it. So I think when we start talking about cannabinoids in terms of that stress modulation, the chronic use and managing that chronic stress starts to become something that's, beneficial to your overall immune health. The other part of this in terms of other cannabinoids and other components of cannabis, again, that starts to take us outside into sort of more holistic perspective, because the cannabinoids are very promiscuous in terms of they like to interact with a lot of different types of receptors and different functions. So we know that they interact with, the inflammatory pathways, but also with things like neurotransmitters, things like serotonin, GABA, which is a calming neurotransmitter, and sodium channels, all these other things. So there's a lot of different spin-off effects where it can be helpful in managing that stress response. So that becomes super, again, important in terms of, okay, let's manage those stress hormones and the suppression of the immune system. The other components that you mentioned, again, it's hard because how do you standardize for these? And there's things that we haven't even explored with. One of the herbs one of the plants that I use quite frequently for in oncology and also in allergies, for example, is something called quercetin. And quercetin is the yellow pigment. It's in apple skins and onion and things like that. But it's one of these things that helps to prevent sort of mast cells, which are the things that release histamine. and it prevents those from taking off. So again, there's that other regulatory element of that particular compound. The omega-3 blend of hemp oil, just in and of itself, you've got the ratio of your omega-3, 6, and 9 oils. Those are beneficial to the immune system because those are things that the signals that control inflammation are made out of, your fatty acids. Again, if we go into things like terpenes and stuff like that, beta-caryophyllene is definitely one of my favorite ones that I like to pay attention to. But it's definitely got some interesting impacts on inflammatory processes and things like that, and sort of regulating that immune function. Some of these other terpenes, begin to sort of, we don't know enough about them in the immune system, like limonene and linalool and myrcene and these types of things. Where do they kind of fit into that? But again, my suspicion is that more of those are kind of these sort of epigenetic things, like changing the stress response, allowing the immune system to function better.
Hey everyone, I hope you found this information super helpful. Please don't forget to subscribe below right here, and stay tuned for all the latest and greatest from EndoCanna and what we have to say about endocannabinoid system and DNA. Because remember, cannabis is personal. Stay healthy, stay well. Thank you.